What is the most brainwashed cult in the world? Story 1. Scientology is running on its second, third, and now fourth generation raised exclusively within the cult itself. People whose entire worldview is shaped in an echo chamber where they cannot know better because they aren't given access to the information. It's wild to me that there's a historical record of Hubbard writing this stuff up, editing on the fly, and openly lying about things he did, yet these people believe fully in a god he invented and the nonsense rituals around it. How delusional can you be? It's really quite terrifying. It's a cult from the 60s, the largest one that has survived. A lot of the weirdness is baked in simply from being of that period. A lot of weirdness is baked in because Hubbard had bipolar disorder and was a patient in a hospital for schizophrenic people. He was diagnosed with whatever medical term was used before schizophrenia. His wife and possible wives stated he was a paranoid schizophrenic, needing to clear yourself of little beings that live in you and control you. That's the fundamental basis of Scientology. It's self-help angle and culture of self-help from the 60s is probably what got it going. Schizophrenia, or the psychosis part of bipolar, probably has quite a lot to do with quite a few of the most popular religions today. And considering Operation Snow White, Where's Shelley, and other shenanigans, I consider them to be a threat as well. We should be taking them more seriously. Rumors of their ships holding slave labor, people trapped and isolated away from their families, refusal to acknowledge and or treat mental illness, etc. The fact that they tangled with the US government and won is ridiculous. A huge problem, and it's more than just their tax status. It sends a message that with enough people you can take over the federal government, which should scare every other American into sobriety. But we look the other way or write them off as Hollywood BS instead of a global threat. Luckily, they are waning lately, but I would feel better if they were finally shut down for the human rights abuses alone. And this is why Leah Remini honestly deserves a ton of respect. She's probably done more than anyone else to take them on successfully and expose them and make people aware, and at great personal risk and social ostracization. And it's not like she was once duped as an adult, she was raised in the cult from childhood, one of the very few celebrities to actually use their status for a cause effectively. Story 2. Any cult where the members have been convinced to kill themselves. It takes a lot of brainwashing to make people ignore their innate survival instinct. One of the tricks of the cult leader trade is to find people who are halfway there already. Jehovah's Witnesses kill themselves on the regular with the blood transfusion doctrine, not only themselves but their children. They had one of their Watchtower magazines back in the 80s, I think 89, that had a cover of a bunch of children's pictures that had given their lives for their god, and it was all for the blood belief. Sickening. Thankfully these days, at least in the US, we don't let JWs let their children die due to blood product refusal. If a child needs blood, the child gets blood. My hospital, I'm a PEDS critical care nurse, even has a special form to sign that we developed with the local JW elders that allows JW parents to have their desire to refuse blood on record while simultaneously allowing us to give blood to the child without needing to resort to a judge/court order. Just watched a Waco documentary. The FBI burned that building to the ground, expecting all the members to run fleeing. They didn't. They died martyrs to their god and believed it was their plan. Like 60 adults and 26 kids burned alive. Disgustingly mishandled by the government, but even more insane they didn't flee. Story 3. Scientology hands down. Those people are drinking the Kool-Aid like it's nobody's business. Source: was a member for 3 months before escaping and burning all of my Tom Cruise posters. I was in there for a week. They asked if I wanted a job and I knew nothing about them. The ideas that they were pushing were contrary to what I had learned, and they claimed the confusion I felt would be helped by hanging on to that 1940s looking electrical thing. Can't remember what it was called. I had a really bad feeling about it, so I stopped going. Plenty of phone calls and guilt tripping to try and get me back. Luckily, I hadn't told them where I lived. Took a couple of months before they gave up. I visited their center in Times Square out of morbid curiosity when I was a teen. They had me try out the E-meter, and it was hard not to laugh. The only question I remember was them asking me to name a band, and for some reason I mentioned Black Flag, even though I'd only ever heard a couple of their songs. The test administrator started crowing about how the E-meter results showed how I really loved Black Flag. I like Henry Rollins fine from what I've seen of him on various TV shows, but to this day, 20 plus years later, have still never listened to Black Flag. I'm not above criticizing any religion. I think they are outdated belief systems passed down from primitive man. Those systems were created to help them cope with the unexplainable. Why did the sun rise and fall? Why the winds blew? What happened to a person when they died? Most of those questions have been answered. The only reason those beliefs are still around is because your parents instilled them in you, as did their parents before them, and so on. Scientology, however, is on another level. It was founded in the 50s and is about aliens from outer space, and that the founder was a science fiction writer. Wasn't that a red flag for anyone? Did nobody connect those dots before joining? Story 4. Jehovah's Witnesses. Sorry, not sorry. Anyone who lets a kid die instead of getting a blood transfusion, a procedure that has been around for a long time and is extremely regulated for religious reasons, is a cult to me. I know a pediatrician who told me that when a JW kid needed surgery, they would sometimes ask the DA to temporarily make the child a ward of the state. The parents would accept this because of deniability. How anyone can believe that a deity would not see through this is beyond me, by the way. They tried to recruit me for college. I was in econ with the main girl who invited me to Bible study and was super friendly. Then I was invited to a party where they sat me down in a circle and tried to guilt/shame me into joining. I said I just got out of a messed up relationship where I was being manipulated and abused. You think I want to go through that again? And left. Yep, my mom was one. Look up Youths Who Put God First that they put out, featuring the kids they let die and what they had to say about it. Absolute demons. Add that they keep flip-flopping whether blood transfusions are okay over the years. Just want to clarify, my mom was an angel, as well as some of her friends from their congregation. They were/are good people who were brainwashed, hence the cult status the JW organization has. My dad told me they preyed on her as she was going through postnatal depression in the late 70s, and that's how she joined, for anyone interested. A friend of my mom's is the head of a hospital. One time they had a kid brought into the ER with either extreme blood loss or some condition that required a blood transfusion for the kid to be saved. I don't remember the details anymore, so he rushes to the parents and tells them to sign waivers/whatever those are called, that they, the parents, have been informed about the need for the transfusion and agree to it, or something like that. ASAP, which they flat out refuse to do. So naturally, he asks them why and explains that the kid will die if he doesn't get one, and they tell him they're Jehovah's Witnesses and that that's against their religion. The doctor takes time, as much as he can, and insists they sign the papers, but they refuse. Long story short, he told them he'd use pig blood for the transfusion if they didn't sign the papers, which was a lie, of course, and that got them to sign everything reluctantly. I was a teen myself when I heard the story, and I vividly remember how it shocked me. Like, you were willing to have your kid die when a simple procedure could save him? Story 5. Just saw the Netflix documentary called Escaping Twin Flames. Disturbing stuff with the two leaders making a fortune by mind-screwing their following. This might be the answer because those leaders were the least charismatic people I've heard of leading a cult. Those people must have been seriously vulnerable to ever fall into that. The craziest part is that they did it all over Zoom. The modern digital age of cult/cult-like social groups is an area of study that the power-holding majority of academic researchers have willingly ignored for decades now. There are a lot of younger sociologists studying extremism and general collective behavior who have tried really hard to change that, but the older folks gatekeep those peer-reviewed journals. It's a shame. Haven't seen the whole thing, but it's super weird for me. I went to high school with Jeff, and he was in a lot of the same friend circles and extracurriculars. He was a spazzy, spiky-haired band geek who I couldn't imagine having the logistical acumen to run a cult. He seemed to go a bit off the rails after high school and moved to Hawaii to build some sort of shack in the woods, and we lost touch not long after. I almost wonder if he's just as much part of the flock as the rest of the sheep, because the dude I knew was definitely more of a follower than a leader. Story 6. Flat Earth, and they thought we're the ones that are being brainwashed. Like, bruh. I've never understood what the supposed benefit of lying about the shape of the Earth is. Let's say the Earth was flat. What's the benefit of telling people it's a globe? How does it change anything? All it would do is increase airline fuel costs. But no, somehow every airline, every government, every person that has ever been to space, every physicist, every researcher, they are all lying to you. That's a delusion. That's why I don't believe in a lot of the conspiracies that involve more than just just a few people or organizations. Can a room full of people keep up a big lie? Sure. Can thousands of people from all over the world be told to keep up a lie without one single one going, hey, this is wrong, and going public with receipts? Absolutely not. The number of people who would have had to keep up the lie that the Earth is round, not only today but throughout the centuries, would easily be in the millions. Moreover, most things that we take for granted wouldn't exist. Satellites? No. No GPS as well. No magnetic field lines, no magnets, no compasses, no electricity. Guess everything is just sorcery now. But they have never thought that far. They are incapable of doing so. Why are all the billionaires investing in space tourism all of a sudden when they should have tried to hide space from everyone to prevent the truth from coming out? And why would someone pay for it? But no, all they do is take out one of those fluid scales and look, it's in the center. Story 7. Love Has Won cult people are pretty crazy. The fact that the leader was professing it was all a scam and that she needed to go to a hospital in her last moments, then the followers basically shrugged it off as her being delirious, is proof of their brainwashing. If they weren't still actively recruiting, you could almost say things worked themselves out naturally. They came to Hawaii during COVID and claimed the leader was the descendant of the Hawaiian goddess of lava/volcanoes, Pele. They ended up on Kauai, and the mayor went down there and kicked them out. He made sure they weren't harmed, but he kicked them out, escorted them to the airport. Then he warned other mayors on the other islands to watch out for them. The Maui mayor was waiting with the police in case they came here. The documentary was so wild for that chance to see the members speak for themselves about the events and how everything was just still fact to them. Robin Williams, everything. To look into their eyes as they sincerely ranted about their reality was just quite the opportunity. Just found out about this from this comment and looked them up. A manager at McDonald's abandoned her third husband and children, forming a cult where she was the 534th mother goddess. They traveled around and eventually settled in Hawaii to set up their cult, but she claimed to be a reincarnation of a Hawaiian god, who caused the locals to constantly protest her compound, which forced her to leave. Eventually, she claimed this. To accomplish this, she needed to regularly communicate with the Galactic, an etheric team of spiritual ambassadors that she said was largely made up of deceased celebrities like Robin Williams, John Lennon, and Michael Jackson, as well as the living Donald Trump. Then promptly started ingesting so much silver on top of apparently being an alcoholic and anorexic. She died at 45, yet her followers now believe she transcended into the fifth dimension and have since split into two small groups that still worship her. Oh, and her cult members took out her eyes and dressed up her dead body and made a shrine, which caused them to be charged with child abuse. Children were there, and desecration of a corpse. Very crazy. Story 8. Andrew Tate's followers, the same unoriginal personality copy-pasted onto many brain-dead and self-absorbed men. I met a chef just over a year ago at my old workplace and we got on all right. We had the same attitudes towards how to best manage the workplace, treated our staff well, and had a few similar interests. Not someone I would rush to hang out with, but a pretty great person to work with. It's always good when the front-of-the-house manager and head chef get on well. But there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my head that told me this guy was bad news. I couldn't quite figure out why until I followed him on Instagram and found out that he was reposting Andrew Tate's videos on his story pretty frequently. Then the little comments and odd interactions started to become so much more obvious, and I distanced myself from him pretty quickly. Some time ago, I was on my way home with my daughter, way too young luckily, and heard what I think was pre/early teens speaking fondly of Andrew Tate. 6 guys, 2 girls. These guys were spewing the most obnoxious, chauvinistic views I've honestly ever heard, and they barely had pubes. Not common to our culture, but with my daughter with me, I knew that if I didn't say anything, I'd regret it for God knows how long. Said my true feelings on Andrew Tate, asked if they truly understood what they were saying, and asked the girls how they feel about their so-called guy friends speaking like that. They were really confrontational at first, but once I also calmed down, not gonna lie, I was seeing red, but realized quickly these were young people, so no point in shouting. I felt, mostly hoped, that I got them to get checked. When they heard their girlfriends saying their POV, it all quickly changed. I don't know, hopefully I changed some for the better. Story 9. Qanon. I feel this is by far the worst one because it grew to tens of millions of people in a matter of 1 to 2 election cycles, big enough to propel that Mormon fraud guy's movie Sound of Freedom to over $200 million in ticket sales, big enough to determine local and presidential elections if everyone outside of it isn't unified against it. MAGA is the most destructive cult because it can wield power over the entire world by putting someone like Trump back in as president, and sane Republicans are too cowardly or too self-serving to disavow them. They can't say anything negative about Trump because it would alienate the same people they need to remain in power, so it's both self-serving and cowardice. My guess is they'll have to put up with him until he dies and then piece together a new formula based on the atmosphere at that point in time. I also believe they're on board with his intentions to dismantle what's left of our democracy. It's going to be more messy and chaotic than they would like, but the end justifies the means. I can't believe I had to scroll this far to find Q. These people are nuts, and what worries me most is that it is so prone to spin-offs. I work for a place that is pretty deep into southern Ohio. I won't be there for much longer, I hope, but it is full of these left-brained mouth breathers. They tried to tell me that the government, Biden, was planning a mass genocide of US citizens. How did they know that? Because they saw thousands and thousands of black plastic caskets being stored outside somewhere near a Walmart in Texas. Swear to God. I asked why the government would take the time, money, and effort to do the courtesy of putting people in caskets after committing said genocide. There were 4 people standing around me whose looks suggested I had just pulled Trump's face off to reveal Bill Clinton. I stumbled onto a website one time that was a QAnon den and made a comment. OMG, it was like picking up a rock and causing an avalanche. This is how they tried to work me. Started by sending me stories from mainstream media, could be fact-checked, but also kind of outlandish. Stuff to make someone say, "Oh, I didn't know that happened. That doesn't seem right." It was there to get the reader's attention and make them question what they knew. All was factual and could be checked. This was their do your research pitch. 2. Next came the less reliable sites with more outlandish stuff. Stuff to make you say, maybe, I don't know if that's true, but the other stuff was, if you fall for it. This was a slush pit of facts and fiction. Harder to fact check, but some were true. 3. Send me the indoctrination news sites, full of content that is simply partisan BS about outlandish acts of cruelty, abuses, sci-fi, and things that were just gross. These were designed to make people say, "Oh wow, these people are horrible monsters. I don't know if it's all true, but something is wrong here." This was working me up for the mission. 4. Then they wanted me to spread the information. At that point, you were welcomed as part of the community, love from all sides and such. All were designed to evoke feelings of shock, fear, and anger, and activism towards untrue data. That was my experience anyway. I can see how the unsuspecting victim can fall down the rabbit hole pretty fast. Story 10. Mormons. I had to scroll to the bottom and still didn't see this. Raised LDS. I can assure you, it's a cult. The church is a tax-exempt hedge fund that funds all kinds of political action, including Prop 8 in California. Up to 100,000 missionaries actively recruiting new members globally. The new wave of anti-LGBTQ legislation, which makes gay sex a capital punishment in several African countries, was lobbied by and funded largely by a non-profit organization, Family Watch International, which was founded and is run by Sharon Slater, a Mormon. 100% groupthink. Creepy interviews with men in suits who determine how offensive your behavior and enforce obedience through manipulation and coercion. Brainwashing from birth to endorse a cosmic worldview that is misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic, racist, and super judgmental. Nice on the outside, super culty on the inside. I barely knew anything about Mormonism growing up. Not all that publicly known in my West Texas hometown. We had a ton of churches, but I only ever remember seeing one of them labeled for LDS. Anyhow, we had a new family with 4 kids, all 1 year apart, and moved across the street. Friendly family, reserved, but not fully closed off. I babysat for them once. That's when I found out they were Mormon. The only books and movies the kids had were LDS children's stories, but holy crap, were they the most well-behaved children I ever babysat. Utah ranks one of the highest in suicides. Apologists will try to link it to high altitude, but it's mostly Mormon related. I, as a 7-year-old, actually thought it would be better to die and go to the celestial kingdom than turn 8 and be sinful, accountable, and try to live the perfect standard that was set. I'm not the only one who thought that. Mormonism is a suicide cult. I'm glad I am in a better place now. Ex-Mormon here. Mormons are brainwashed in the sense that they spend hours every week reading their own propaganda and are encouraged to shun anti-Mormon literature. But at the same time, they are also encouraged to go to college and get educated. I agree with another commenter that Mormonism's worldview is fundamentally misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic. But most brainwashed? Nah. 100% groupthink? Nah. There's more diversity inside the church than that, and always has been. Yes, people have done terrible things in the name of Mormonism, but in my opinion, most of the anecdotes people are sharing here are extreme examples and don't represent average Mormons. Average Mormons are misguided, but generous casserole-wielding try-hard do-gooders, it's not fair to judge a group by the worst examples, and that's true of Mormons and any other group. Came here for this. Growing up in Utah and not being LDS, you immediately get thrown out of the norm and looked down upon. LDS church every other block, with Mormon church being one of the largest businesses in the world. There's some pretty sketchy stuff that goes on behind the scenes, not to mention the fact that the Book of Mormon was written by Joseph Smith when he was 14. The whole idea of polygamy, the celestial kingdom, and the platform is very cult-like to me. Story 11. Jim Jones's cult was the origin of the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid because he convinced over 900 followers to commit revolutionary suicide with cyanide-laced Flavor Aid. Although, as some people have pointed out, many or most of them, being surrounded by armed guards, had little choice. Then there's David Koresh, who somehow persuaded many followers to let him impregnate their pre-teenage daughters. To this day, some of those parents, having survived the Waco fire, say they don't regret that either. And who could forget Shoko Asahara, whose cultists attempted to murder all of Tokyo with homemade sarin gas. Personally, I couldn't say which of them all was the most brainwashed. Jonestown was a mass homicide, not suicide. He took their passports and had armed guards all around the compound. Those people were trapped and forced to kill their children and themselves. Reading up on Jonestown is enlightening and will show that event in a totally different light. There is a podcast that plays the actual audio from the Jonestown mass murder, though I don't recommend it. It's been probably 8 years since I heard it, and I'm still shaken by it. Those people didn't want to die, and the absolute wails of grief and panic from the kids when they started seeing their peers dying was horrifying. Then the whole time Jones was replying to the horror by sounding annoyed and telling them to accept it. Then Jones didn't even have the guts to kill himself. He had to make someone else do it. Hopefully, this summary is enough that you never seek out to listen. It haunts me. One should not forget that Koresh also convinced his members to take up arms against the US government, resulting in them all burning to death. That wasn't the end of his influence though, because Waco and Ruby Ridge became the rallying call of the materialistic right, which snowballed into the Tea Party movement and the Freedom Caucus and into a significant chunk of Trumpettes. Few other cult leaders' actions have resulted in changing the cultural fabric of a superpower. While David Koresh was not a good man, claiming that he instigated the events that would lead to the burning down of that complex is ridiculous. They were, as far as anyone is aware, legally purchasing and selling weapons. The ATF then came in and essentially murdered all those people. The US government is responsible for those people's deaths. Thanks for proving my point. The ATF had a legally and correctly issued search warrant for the compound, as well as arrest warrants for Koresh and several other leaders. We are a country of law. You don't get to say no when a court issues a search warrant. Story 12. Moonies. I had a neighbor, a salt-of-the-earth middle-aged Italian from Philadelphia, Tony. Lived next to him for years. One day he came to my door with a DVD. He asked me to watch it. I said, okay, and he turned around and left. I'm very curious and immediately pop it into the player. It's a video about Moon's coronation in Washington, D.C. I was like, what the fuck? Tony's a Moonie? A couple of days later, he came back and asked me if I watched it. I said yes, and he asked for it back. I pulled it out of the player and gave it back. He asked me what I thought, and I said it was interesting, but I'm an atheist, and it was not my cup of tea. He said okay, thanked me, and turned around and left. I never let his beliefs get in the way of being the same good neighbors we always were. I think that the church forced him to do this. Religion had never come up before. I also suspect that he was part of those mass weddings Moon would throw. The wife was Korean. Seems to have worked out for him though. Shut up! Then people will know how Rev Moon bought Reagan, the Washington Times, and the monopoly on the sushi market in the USA. The Moonies in Japan are the most cultist of all. The last prime minister was assassinated because of his association with them. As a result, the Moonie bubble may be bursting in Japan, and I hope it wakes up people in other countries where Moonies exert control through bribery. Sorry, I meant political contributions. A girl I went to high school with was almost married off in one of their mass ceremonies at age 17 against her will. She only got out of it because she snitched to the school and they put a stop to it. Or maybe CPS did. She was never allowed to hang out with friends after that, but she did get a full scholarship out of state, so I hope she got away and is doing fine now. I was born into this like some of the other people in the thread. Fortunately, I got out at a fairly young age, right after high school essentially, so 2006. But even then, the damage done to me and the relationship with my family is still a constant struggle I'm working on and getting help for. Even with the scandals and insane practices that still pop up in the news every now and then, and still my mom is still very much devout, despite knowing how much it damaged me and created what feels like an inescapable mental health damage for me. I wouldn't even consider her to be as devout as many of the other parents of people my age I grew up with in the community who also could free themselves from it. It almost feels like after all this time, they can't seem to come to terms with the fact that it was all a gargantuan con and they need to double down on their faith to avoid realizing it. It was terrible, absolutely terrible, but therapy has been a huge tool for me to continue the journey of healing. It sucks so bad though to still be reminded of the damage done when I go to family gatherings, which unfortunately are few and far between because of it. Story 13. Probably none of what has been listed, and probably an actual cult, like Exclusive Brethren or Scientology or something. Scientology has been busted for kidnapping, trafficking, forced child labor, child brides, killing people through malnutrition and preventing needed medicines. You name it, they do it. They literally run Clearwater City in Florida, and have been sued multiple times for people dying of malnutrition there. They've been banned from multiple countries. Not even Hare Krishnas or Moonies are outlawed like that. They have relentless lawyers and have sued the US government multiple times. They're the reason churches don't pay taxes, if you didn't have enough reasons to hate them. They're also the only organization to successfully penetrate the US government on multiple levels, leading to their own tax-free status and providing legal cover stifling any modern calls in Congress to tax churches. Read Operation Snow White. Scientology hates peer-reviewed science, so they have their own forms of malnutrition from which multiple people have died. Also hate medicines and vaccines, e.g. anti-seizure drugs, so more people have died. Web search John Travolta's son and how he died. Also, Scientology practices a pretty effective form of brainwashing both on their members as well as teaching it to their students. Search bull baiting for one example of many. Story 14. MLMs. MLMs are dangerous. The only way to make money is to manipulate more vulnerable people and convince them they can make money, then place failure on them personally, saying they didn't work hard enough. Gross figures are reported as net figures, and with tiny profit margins, makes people think they are going to make thousands. Look at me, I made $8,000 last month, not saying that $7,800 was spent on stock. Some of them are even more dangerous by putting in their pitch that anyone who tries to tell you the truth about MLMs are haters who want you to fail, so cut them out of your life. Even if they're family, meaning your whole life becomes MLM. It's just a money hole that a small amount of people make money from. My mom is in an MLM, and I went to some meetings about 10 years ago where I immediately learned all the possible selling arguments if someone disagrees or has doubts about the products. And make a list with all of the people you know, and whoever says no, write their answer down as not yet. Story 15. Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ. It's a Philippines-based cult that believes Jesus Christ is just human and that their prophet is the designated one, and they believe only people from their religion will be saved. They are not allowed to read the Bible. Their tithes are compulsory, as well as their attendance in church, and not being able to fulfill those will have them questioned or expelled from the church, which is a much better thing. Attending other religions' weddings or gatherings isn't allowed. They don't celebrate Christmas holidays, and they segregate their males and females during services. They're kind of the religious buzzkills in the country. It's pretty pathetic. They also have their leader mandate who they should vote for in the national elections. Story 16. Given the tiny handful of people benefiting from it, and the billions of people made miserable, hungry, homeless, or otherwise suffering from it, and the trillions spent brainwashing people into believing and adhering to it as the only possible way of life, I'd say money. After all, the strongest cults are able to convince their victims to fight for the cult. People love to complain that religion isn't real, and it controls so many, yet they don't realize that money isn't real, and it literally controls every gear in international society. Ah yes, a cult that predates the Roman kingdom. Money has been around longer than monotheistic religion. It simply makes doing business easier. I do things, grow food, build a house, etc. I make money. I can then use it as a medium of exchange to acquire the things I need: clothes, shelter, food. It simply cuts out the middleman and makes transactions easier. Chasing money is the problem. Its existence lets us advance to modern society. No, its existence allows people to hoard value, to take a piece when others transact, taxes, to transact unfairly in our favor, buy low, sell high, to steal more and use money as a weapon. It allows every transaction to become unbalanced. It is not required for advancement, and has mostly only turned progress into progress in a direction that benefits the very few. After all, we haven't really advanced since we have no idea where we're going. For all we know, we've gone backwards. Horribly, but while inventing toys that we think are clever. Even medicine is not simply a good thing. It's brought massive problems too. A slower, more consensual and considered progress would almost certainly have been possible and far better if money had not been invented. Story 17. Stupid answer, Taylor Swift fans. These people will claw through their own families to know everything about her. Serious answer, flat earthers. Despite science disproving them, their cognitive dissonance is unwavering. The parasocial relationship with Swift is quite scary. Sure, I kinda idolize a few artists and famous people, and I'd love to ever be close to them and tell them how much positivity they've brought to my life. But that's it. I've seen people relating everything to a Swift quote, saying that she has changed the entire planet and treating her like she's some kind of reborn god. Then you have the insane amount of stalkers that would do anything to get a photo of her. Not even the crazier BTS fans are like that, and that's saying a lot. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you'd like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.